Hey guys, tonight we trudge softly into the dim candlelit corners of Ming Dynasty bureaucracy, not the wars, not the emperors, not the grand inventions, but the noble, ink-stained journey of a single tax receipt. Yes, paper. And not even the glamorous kind with dragon seals or royal decrees. We're talking about the slow-burning, grain accounting, back-shelf languishing kind of paper. You probably won't survive this if you're hoping for action. But if you've ever wondered how something as mundane as a tax slip can outlive dynasties, generations, and maybe you're able to stay awake, well, welcome. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere special, under a blanket fort in Brussels, or a hammock in Hanoi, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I read them all, even the ones from 3 AM tax season survivors. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first conscious moment begins in a modest room of gray bricks, faint incense smoke curling overhead, and the gentle scratch of brush against parchment. A junior clerk in a cotton tunic leans over a low desk, brow furrowed like he's drafting poetry, but no, he's just itemizing a rice tithe from the Chen family farmstead. You, the receipt, are his final stroke, a rectangular slip of bamboo fiber paper, damp with fresh ink, pressed with a square red seal that smells faintly of crushed cinnabar and authority. You don't know it yet, but this seal marks you for a life of glacial movement, of pigeonhole drama and inkpot politics. As the clerk blows gently on your still wet corner, you're placed to dry beside a small jade frog figurine, probably the most exotic thing you'll ever meet up close. There's no ceremony, no blessing. Just a soft exhale and the silent hope that you don't smudge. Outside, carts rumble past the almond gates. The farmer who just paid his dues wipes his brow, unaware that this slip of paper, your tiny self, will soon live longer than his grandchildren. He's traded 20 bushels of rice for a handful of bureaucratic peace, and all of it hangs on your fragile fibers. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is crowing despite it being well passed on, and a magistrate is yelling about the ink being too thin. Welcome to Ming bureaucracy, where even the shadows seem to move by protocol. A lesser-known fact? These receipts were sometimes written with such practiced brushwork, they'd be mistaken centuries later for amateur calligraphy samples by over-enthusiastic collectors. And yes, one even ended up in a scholar's marriage proposal collection by accident. Historians still argue whether that was a romantic gesture or just bad filing. You dry quickly in the subtropical warmth, your brushstrokes sharp and bold. At your top edge, the characters for the province, likely Jiangxi or Zhejiang, curl with dignified weight, while below, the tax amount and payer's name anchor your identity. No one praises your penmanship. No one marvels at your potential. You're not the star of a decree or the recipient of a poem. You are, simply, necessary. And in the Ming Dynasty, that is more than enough to keep you moving through the wheels of state. And just like that, you're carefully sandwiched between two duller siblings, slid into a thick bamboo folder with a string tie, and filed on a low shelf that smells like mildew in mice dreams. Your journey has officially begun, not with a bang, but with the shuffling sound of a clerk's sandals leaving the room. You don't move again for 3 days. During that time, a spider weaves a single thread across your folder's corner, and the junior clerk forgets your existence entirely. You're wedged between receipts for sesame oil and duck feathers, none of whom are particularly talkative. This is your first real taste of bureaucracy, long stretches of nothing, punctuated by shuffling and the occasional dramatic sneeze. Then, one humid afternoon, you're plucked from the shelf with all the fanfare of someone grabbing a forgotten shopping list. The clerk grumbles about backlogs and ink shortages as he unties your folder and pulls you free. You feel the warmth of his fingers and the faint tremor in his hands, either from nerves or from too much fermented bean curd at lunch. Probably both. Your brushwork is still crisp. The red seal on your corner, slightly smeared now, gives you the weight of officialdom. You are, in bureaucratic terms, alive and valid. You're laid flat on a large wooden desk covered in tiny dents from years of misaligned abacuses. Around you, other slips are being sorted into piles, overpaid, underpaid, suspiciously missing, and to be sent onward. You're placed, quite unceremoniously, into the last category. It sounds noble, but really, it's just the category 4, not my department. A senior scribe arrives, his robe's a slightly higher thread count than the others, and begins reading documents with the same passion someone might reserve for cold porridge. He glances at you. grunts, sets a paperweight on your bottom edge and continues down the pile. It's during this process that you first hear the phrase duplicate brushwork protocol, a fancy way of saying someone has to copy your contents by hand into a larger ledger. This ledger, thick as a roof tile and twice as dusty, sits on its own desk like an emperor in exile. Copying begins at twilight. A different clerk this time, older, slower, and far more talkative. He narrates as he writes, mumbling things like Chin family, again, and why can't they standardize the column widths? You learn that he has a cat named Plum Sauce and that he secretly dreams of retiring to raise silkworms. You do not offer comment. Meanwhile, the wind rustles the window shutters, and the oil lamp flickers like it's considering early retirement too. Somewhere in the background, a bamboo chime creaks lazily. The ledger receives your contents with minimal complaint, though a few characters are copied slightly off, and each written like rice, which could one day be either a typo or a historian's mystery. Fun tidbit, in some cases, receipts like you were actually reused, ink scraped off and rebrushed to save paper. Luckily, your scribe respects your integrity, and your fibers remain unviolated. Historians still argue whether this preservation was due to diligence or sheer laziness. Once copied, you're briefly compared to your clone. Both of you are held up to the fading light, like twins under scrutiny. A second seal is added in a brighter shade of red, either a confirmation or a declaration that nobody else wants to deal with you. And then, your destination is announced, prefecture forwarding. You're gently slid back into your folder and tucked among a stack of other receipts awaiting transport. The folder's tie is tighter now, the edge is cleaner. You're going somewhere. Possibly to glory. Probably to more shelves. As night settles over the county office, you rest under the weight of bureaucracy. You are no longer just a piece of paper. You are cargo in the great administrative river. And you're about to be carried downstream. Dawn breaks not with a rooster's crow but with the creak of cartwheels and a bored ox yawning through its bit. You are tucked securely in a lacquered document chest, lined with rough cloth, smelling faintly of fermented beans, and placed among scrolls, forms, and the occasional hastily folded tea wrapper someone thought was worth archiving. The journey to the prefecture begins with the slow roll of wooden wheels over uneven stone roads. You jostle slightly each time the cart hits a rut, your folder vibrating against a spool of jute rope. The official in charge of transport, Mr. Gao, a man whose posture says he once dreamed of martial glory but whose current life is heavy on tea and light on action, sits beside the ox, humming a mournful opera aria and shielding his papers from road dust with a delicate fan painted with mountain pines. You travel through misty fields and damp bamboo groves. At one point, a traveling musician on the roadside plays a melancholic tune on a shao flute, and even you feel the wistfulness in your fibers. A butterfly lands on the cart's edge, considers joining the bureaucracy, then wisely flutters off. By midday, you arrive at the prefectural office, a larger, older version of the county yamen, with more guards and significantly more tea stains. The guards glance at the document chest with vague indifference, clearly more concerned with finishing their turn and avoiding paperwork of their own. Inside, the chest is opened and your folder is transferred to a holding table under the supervision of an assistant administrator with immaculate eyebrows and a perpetual sigh. She unties your folder, flips through your contents, and nods with the solemn gravity of someone who's already thinking about lunch. You are tagged with a fresh slip, verified county submission, and placed in a different stack, this time bound for mid-level audit. You're now among documents about land surveys, marriage certificates, and an oddly folded drawing of a goose labeled urgent. No one questions it. That evening, you're brought into the records chamber. You expected solemnity, perhaps the quiet reverence of a document sanctuary. What you get is chaos. Stacks of paper teeter like drunken scholars, scribes argue over ink tones, and someone is eating peanuts directly over a registry of births. Here, you are almost mistaken for scratch paper. A distracted junior scribe grabs you, quill in hand, before being yelled at by a supervisor who identifies your seal just in time. You're saved from becoming the liner of a tea tray, a fate worse than misfiling. Fun fact, some prefectural clerks used worn-out receipts as makeshift bookmarks or even, on cold days, padding inside their sleeves. Historians still argue whether this was pragmatic recycling or complete disrespect. You eventually land in a pile marked pending verification rice class, a term that sounds more delicious than it is. A weary tax auditor schemes your brushwork while sipping chrysanthemum tea, murmuring phrases like good spacing and decent numbering. You glow under the candlelight. Or maybe you're just stained slightly from the tea steam. Later that night, you're sorted again, this time by an assistant who hums to himself as he works, using the sleeve of his robe to nudge papers into place. He hums an old village lullaby, and though you have no ears, the rhythm settles over you like rice husks in a field. The folder you rest in is now more structured. You're clipped, yes, clipped, into place with a bamboo pin, which feels like a promotion. You've made it through county submission, survived transportation, and now sit on the cusp of prefectural inspection. Not bad for a slip of paper born in a back room beside a jade frog. You close the day pressed gently between records of duck taxes and barley pledges, surrounded by the low murmur of candlelit pages and the slow, rhythmic sighs of sleeping clerks. Outside, the moon slips behind silk clouds, and in your dreams, you imagine yourself mistaken for an imperial edict, just once. You begin this part of your journey stacked in a tidy pile beneath a paperweight shaped like a carp. A metaphor? Perhaps. But mostly it's just heavy. You're in the queue now, waiting your turn for official prefectural verification, where tax records either find glory or get re-inked by someone grumbling about calligraphy quality and substandard loop closures. The office you're in smells like ink, mildew, and the faint tang of pickled radish. Clerks come and go, shuffling documents like gamblers dealing cards they don't particularly want to play. The head clerk, Mr. Liu, finally lifts you from the stack. His fingers are stained black blue, the nails perfectly squared, the sleeves of his robe lined with carefully embroidered crows for reasons no one has yet explained. He reads you with a practiced eye, murmuring the details, payer, province, rice owed, date received, like a prayer for continued order. You, in return, behave beautifully. Your ink hasn't run. Your seal is only slightly warped. Your margins? Generous. And for a moment, Mr. Liu hesitates. He seems, dare we say it, impressed. Then comes the real test, ledger matching. You're laid beside a large registry, its pages so heavy they puff dust every time they're turned. Liu moves carefully, eyes flicking back and forth from you to the faded lines of your copy. He makes a noise halfway between a grunt and a cough, either a bureaucratic tick or a signal to no one in particular that he's found a discrepancy. Turns out, the copy scribe misspelled the village name. Dongping instead of Dongqing. A single brushstroke, one dot difference. You can practically hear the debate forming. Historians still argue whether such discrepancies were genuinely accidental or passive-aggressive sabotage between departments. In this case, the cause may be ink fatigue or the cat named Plumsauce stepping on the ledger mid-copy. You'll never know. Mr. Liu reaches for a brush and corrects the ledger. With a single graceful line, the error is smoothed over, and you remain pure, your original script unblemished, a beacon of bureaucratic precision. Now validated, you're passed along to the adjacent chamber for archiving. The archivist, Madame Zhao, is both terrifying and elegant. Her hair is bound in a loop that resembles a formal knot diagram, and she handles each document as if it might contain a secret decree from the heavens. She smells like sandalwood in judgment. She glances at your seal, tests the corner for stiffness, and taps your surface gently with the calligraphy brush like she's coaxing a confession. Then, with an approving nod, she files you into drawer 17C, under grain receipts, 42nd fiscal cycle. You rest there amid rows of quiet peers, their paper fibers humming with a kind of institutional memory. You lie beside a barley certificate and a receipt with a small paw print in the corner, possibly feline, possibly myth. What most people don't know. Ming archives weren't as sterile as legend suggests. Some drawers held cinnamon bark to ward off insects, others were near windows, yellowing one side of the papers over decades. You're lucky, drawer 17C is centered, stable, and dry. As the sun sets over the prefecture walls, the office quiets. Lanterns are extinguished one by one, the scent of smoke curling over ledgers like punctuation. Somewhere, a clerk snores softly beside a half-finished inkstone. And you, tiny, tidy, perfectly formed, sleep amid the rustle of 100 other tax streams. You've passed your first real trial. Not shredded, not reused, not mistaken for scrap. You are officially a verified piece of bureaucratic truth. Tomorrow, of course, the panic audit begins. Morning doesn't arrive with a sunrise so much as a sudden slam. Someone opens the archive drawer with the urgency of a person who's just misplaced a small fortune. You jolt slightly in your folder, stirred from your restful stupor as a flurry of panic whispers sweeps the room. A silver discrepancy. That's the phrase on everyone's lips. Somewhere in the prefecture's tax accounts, an entire ingot's worth of silver has vanished, or never arrived, or was recorded twice. No one is quite sure yet, but everyone is sure someone's going to get blamed. And in a moment like this, even an old rice receipt like you becomes relevant again. You are unceremoniously yanked from drawer 17C by a clerk whose robe is tucked into his waistband, presumably for speed. His hair is half done, half undone, and his eyes carry the wild glint of someone who's had tea, but not sleep. You're rushed to a room labeled audit chamber, which sounds impressive until you see it, a room full of overworked people elbow-deep in paperwork and muttering numbers to themselves like cursed monks. You're spread across a table already full of angry-looking ledgers and another paperweight shaped like a turtle this time, also not metaphorical, just heavy. 3 inspectors surround you, each more suspicious than the last. They point, squint, sniff the seal like it might reveal something extra. One of them even taps you gently with a bamboo rod, as if that might make silver fall out of your characters. Here's where it gets tense. Your data doesn't match. Not because of you, no, you're pristine, but because another copy of you, sent to a side office in parallel, has a different amount listed. 1 bushel less. Or maybe 1 bushel more. Depends on which way you tilt your head and how forgiving the ink gods are feeling today. Historians still argue whether these inconsistencies were the result of honest mistakes, clever fraud, or just poor brush control after a lunchtime wine binge. In your case, the debate ignites. They summon the county records for comparison. They summon the farmer's other payments. They even summon, somewhat awkwardly, the junior clerk who originally filled you out. He arrives, sweaty and red-faced, clutching a packet of dried plum candy for stress. Through a blur of finger-pointing and awkward bows, it becomes clear, the mistake was likely in the ledger duplication, not in you. Your original script, despite all odds, holds up. You, small and ancient and bearing no ego, are suddenly elevated to primary source status. You're the honest one. The reliable one. Your folder is tagged with a red silk ribbon, a signal that you're now under temporary audit protection. For a document, that's basically diplomatic immunity. You're handled more gently. You're placed on a desk with more natural light. Someone even dusts you with a soft bristled brush, as if to say, well done. Fun fact, in particularly severe audit panics, some Ming officials would commission duplicate receipts to retroactively fix discrepancies, forging harmony through sheer paperwork will. You, however, are spared this indignity. The silver remains unaccounted for. Tensions simmer, but the pressure turns away from you. A new theory arises involving a warehouse clerk, a miscounted cart, and a stormy delivery. It's all very dramatic, and yet you remain the quiet center of truth in a swirling storm of ink and panic. By evening, the audit slows. You're placed back into your folder, ribbons still attached, and stored for overnight watch in the inner archive, reserved for active cases. The drawer is soft-lined and smells faintly of camphor. As the lamps flicker low, you hear whispers between clerks, one saying you may be cited in a report to the capital. Another wondering if you'll be requested for inspection by a central auditor. You, humble paper that you are, simply rest. You've done your duty. You've held your numbers. Let them squabble. You're just here for the ride. You wake to the scent of burnt incense and the muted clack of wooden slippers on stone floors. The prefectural audit is officially over. The missing silver has been blamed, tentatively, on a shipment delay from a mountainous district known for both slippery roads and slippery math. You've been exonerated. Respected, even. But before you can bask in the quiet satisfaction of bureaucratic praise, you're handed off again, this time to the office of cross-year verification, a place where papers go not to die, but to be mildly traumatized by footnotes. The clerk assigned to you here is new. He smells of starch and anxiety, and he treats each document like it might explode. He unfolds you with the nervous reverence of someone defusing a calligraphy bomb. His brush hovers hesitantly over the margins, unsure whether to annotate or apologize. Your folder, once tidy, now bulges with additional commentary. There are audit notes, red marks, stamps in 3 shades of cinnabar, and a folded note from a senior auditor that simply says, This is where things get weird. You are temporarily removed from circulation for stabilization. Not for preservation, mind you, that comes later, but because there's now disagreement over whether your seal is county red or sub-prefectural pink. This matters, apparently. Historians still argue whether the Ming used separate seal shades for fiscal versus agricultural matters, or whether the difference is just due to fading in someone's sweaty thumb. While this high-level squabble plays out, you're placed in a leather-bound folder with other questionables. This group includes a wedding receipt with 2 dates, a bridge toll stub with no bridge named, and a piece of silk with writing too tiny to be legible unless you're a hawk. For the next few days, you and your oddball folder mates are shuffled between departments like guests at a banquet no one remembers inviting. A mid-level supervisor holds you up in a meeting in size. A deputy judge squints at your figures while eating ginger biscuits. At one point, you're mistaken for a poetry scroll and narrowly escape being displayed upside down in the guest hall. Fun tidbit, Ming-era guest halls often showcased random documents as decoration, especially if no one could read them. A receipt with good calligraphy could end up alongside a war proclamation or love letter, purely by aesthetic merit. Eventually, someone of consequence, Madame Hong, an archivist with a voice like sanded jade, decides that your seal, while slightly pink, is within acceptable hue tolerances. She makes a single brush notation in elegant script and returns you to the active archive. But something's changed. You now carry a small stitched tag, verified, pink seal, subcategory C. It's sewn into your top corner with golden threads so fine you can barely feel it. And just like that, you're no longer simply a tax receipt. You're a classified specimen. Your new drawer is shallower, more elite. Papers here are sorted not just by type, but by category, cross-category, and, no joke, tone warmth. You lie beside a charcoal-colored property survey and a delivery note for 10 crates of salted eels. Both exude a certain dignity. At night, the archive hushes into that unique silence only old buildings know. Stone cools. Ink dries. Paper settles like sleeping birds. You drift gently into rest, half-curled, knowing that you've not just survived a bureaucratic panic, you've been promoted by it. Your corner tag glints softly in the lamplight, golden and ridiculous. But somehow, it suits you. 3 days later, you're summoned again. Not for another audit, thankfully, but for what they call mid-cycle compilation, which sounds suspiciously like being read, reread, and reorganized by someone with too many bookmarks and not enough friends. You're carried down a hallway with cracked green tiles and into a tall room lined with shelves like ribs. At the center sits the compilation officer, Master Shin, a man whose beard forks like a willow branch and who owns exactly 4 expressions, none of which are pleasant. He works in silence, the only sound being the occasional thwip of paper and the muttered arithmetic of someone calculating rice-to-silver conversion rates in their head. You're placed on his desk. He doesn't greet you. He doesn't even blink. He just picks you up, scans your ink like it personally insulted him, and reaches for a fresh piece of thin, high-grade mulberry paper. He is going to summarize you. This is a sacred moment in bureaucratic tradition, the compilation of annual records. It means your details, your tidy, verified facts, are about to be re-rendered into a new master ledger. You'll be reduced, in a sense, but also eternalized in that abstract way bureaucrats find comfort in. You won't be lost. You'll be condensed. As Shin transcribes, he mouths each word, tongue clicking faintly with every stroke. Chin family, rice, 4th cycle, county seal, pink subcategory. You can tell he hates your pink tag. He flattens you with his sleeve as if to erase the offense. Halfway through, his brush slips. He grunts. The stroke wobbles. A thin thread of ink splays out like a hairline crack in a ceramic bowl. He reaches for a blotting cloth. Hesitates. Then he sighs and keeps going. The mark remains, a flaw in the master copy. A ripple of imperfection. Fun fact, some Ming scholars considered accidental ink runs to be omens. Depending on the direction, it could mean famine, flood, or the auditor's mother-in-law arriving unannounced. Historians still argue whether any actual policies were influenced by such blots. When Shin finishes, he dries the new summary slip over a small brass lantern. Your name, well, the Chin family name, is now part of the permanent ledger. You, as an object, are no longer required for day-to-day reference. That should mean retirement. But no! A younger assistant enters the room, whispering about training examples. Your elegant brushwork, it seems, has been deemed an ideal specimen for junior clerks to study. You're to be used in a class. A class. You are carried upstairs to a side room where aspiring bureaucrats, mostly sons of minor officials, sit cross-legged with brushes in hand and eyes filled with fear. Their assignment: replicate your characters precisely. You're pinned gently under a crystal sheet, something newly introduced to prevent smudging. From beneath, you watch fresh hands attempt your strokes. The first one presses too hard. The second forgets a dot. The third sneezes mid-stroke and has to restart entirely. None of them match you. You're flawless compared to their amateur flailing. And you know it. By sunset, the instructor collects the copies, half-inked disasters, and praises your line quality in front of the class. You've become an example. An ideal. A visual definition of how rice tax receipts should be done. Of course, you're not returned to your previous drawer. No, now you belong in the educational archive, a long, drawer-filled cabinet labeled reference materials, calligraphy and structure. There's a moment, as you're slid in beside a beautifully penned livestock register, that you realize you've become a model. Not a flashy one. Not famous. But known. Whispered about. Occasionally admired by nervous students who fear blotting their futures with bad loops. You rest under the crystal with quiet pride. Even if no one remembers the Chin family's actual rice, they'll remember the slip that recorded it just right. Your new life begins under glass. Literally, each morning, light filters through the paper screen windows and spills across the crystal sheet that shields your brushstrokes. Dust glitters in the air like tiny bureaucratic spirits, and you lie motionless in your little shrine, admired but untouchable. The training room smells faintly of dried ink and hopeful ambition. Every few days, a fresh batch of trainees files in, their robes a little too new, their sleeves a little too long. The instructor uncovers you with a gentle FSHHH of sliding crystal and gestures toward your sealed form like a monk presenting a relic. You are praised for your spacing, your intentional restraint of line weight, your perfect three-dot punctuation near the seal. And then they try to copy you. Again. Spoiler, it doesn't go well. One trainee spills ink on his own knee. Another forgets to leave margins and writes all the way to the edge, earning a dramatic groan from the instructor. A third gets so nervous he breaks his brush mid-stroke. You, of course, remain calm, composed, and unimpressed. Midweek, a visiting scholar arrives, Master Duan, an expert in script classification and the sort of man who believes his tea should be stirred counterclockwise for optimal chi flow. He leans over you with narrowed eyes and murmurs, textbook example of Qianlong-era forward slant. The instructor corrects him, Ming Dynasty, not Qing, and Duan responds with a sniff. Historians still argue whether Ming script styles truly differ from early Qing or whether personal handwriting quirks outshine dynastic distinctions. Duan, evidently, does not enjoy being corrected. You are, at this point, a celebrity within the room. There's talk of copying you for permanent display in the Regional Records Museum. Some suggest making rubbings, those charcoal-on-res paper impressions that will allow your legacy to exist in duplicate, triplicate, even tenfold. One overexcited scribe suggests carving you into a stone stele. But then something strange happens. A younger trainee, frustrated with his failure to replicate your elegance, turns you over. No permission. No ceremony. Just a quick, nervous flip. And there, on your reverse, he spots a faint mark, a single character, barely visible, written in pale ink. It reads, Chu. This changes everything. Chu is not the name of the tax official, nor the payer, nor any recognizable designation. Suddenly, you are not just a model. You are a mystery. Speculation blooms like mold in an unventilated scroll room. Is Chu a scribe's signature? A secret code? The name of a lost administrator? Was it written deliberately or accidentally transferred from a blotting cloth? A committee is formed. Yes, a committee. 3 members of the school staff and 1 visiting archivist now convene weekly in a side room to debate your hidden message. They call it the Chu Enigma, and they take it extremely seriously. Fun tidbit, secret notes on the backs of tax slips were sometimes used as internal jokes, passive-aggressive reminders, or discreet accusations, like double count it again or don't trust the barley guy. Some even included tiny poems. Historians still argue whether these marginalia were tolerated or carefully overlooked. You're moved, again, this time to a special folder labeled Anomalous Reference, Script and Ink. You're no longer just an educational model. You're a subject of research. Your new drawer is lined with silk. Only 3 other documents live here, a permit for fictional geese, a census stub with a drawing of what may be a dragon, and a bamboo paper with circles that no one has decoded. Life is quieter now. Fewer students. More scholars. Less noise, more murmuring. You are studied in silence, turned over, lit from different angles, and gently poked with soft brushes and magnifying tools. At night, you hear someone whispering your characters aloud, as though trying to unlock you with sound. And somehow, you feel it. You are not just preserved. You are being read. It starts with a scholar's notebook. A visiting academic from Hangzhou, a wiry man in layered robes in perpetual motion, spends 2 hours hunched over you, muttering and sketching. He writes notes in tiny crab-leg script, all margins and arrows in bold underlines. Then he does something no one has done in decades. He asks to borrow you. The room freezes. The archive director blinks. The head instructor drops his brush. Someone coughs into their sleeve to hide the gasp. Borrow? You? As if you were a common ledger or an apprentice's ink rag? But he has credentials. He has a stamped letter. And more importantly, he has something better than influence. He has curiosity. You are gently wrapped in padded cloth, sealed inside a lacquered scroll box, and personally escorted to a guest scholar chamber where you're allowed to rest on a low lacquered table beneath filtered lamplight and the warm scent of bamboo parchment. His research? Comparative ink analysis. He believes your brushwork may link multiple regional offices via a single traveling scribe, a theory that excites exactly 6 people in the world but causes those 6 to write extremely long treatises. He takes great care with you. Each morning, he unrolls the cloth with hands washed in rice water and cooled on a stone tile. He compares your strokes to others in his collection, delivery slips, militia rosters, even a ration note with a suspiciously similar chin loop. You become a point of triangulation in a sprawling theory of migratory bureaucratic penmanship. Meanwhile, he uncovers a second anomaly. Near your bottom edge, beneath the main block of text, hidden beneath a faded water stain, there appears to be a tiny character etched almost invisibly into the fiber. He lights it from the side, breathes gently to raise the grain, and there it is, a second name. This time, E. Now there are 2, Chu and E. Names that do not match any part of your documented journey. He records them both. He circles them. He constructs possible narratives, 2 scribes, 1 paper. 1 trainer and 1 apprentice. A relay system? An ink-sharing scheme? Or maybe they were just bored and writing their names in secret? Historians still argue whether such side marks were genuine identifications or simply code for internal audits, messages meant to be seen by one reader only, then forgotten by time. You, being paper, don't remember. But you do hold the memory. That counts for something. Your scholar decides to present his findings. You're brought, carefully, proudly, to a modest academic gathering. Other scrolls are there, sure, but they don't get the attention you do. You are the oldest, the most complete, the most mysterious. People lean in, point, ask to touch. They don't. He calls you receipt Z42, but whispers my lucky charm under his breath when no one is listening. You've become more than an object. You are data. You are enigma. You are, somehow, trending in scholar circles. Fun tidbit, some receipts were used in administrative games, yes, games, where scribes would attempt to guess province and payer identity just from handwriting quirks. It was how they trained new recruits during long winters. You would have been a prize challenge. When the presentation ends, the scholar returns you, reluctantly, to the archive. But not before making one final request. He wants to create a facsimile. You're taken to the copying room, a pristine space with magnifiers, flattened glass plates, and ink so pure it smells like new rain. The copyist assigned to you is silent, swift, and impossibly precise. He studies your lines like a monk studies sutras. It takes him 2 days. The result is stunning. The copy will be sent to a regional museum. The original, you, remain in the archive, but with a fresh folder. Now you carry a golden label, referential original, scribe theory, double signature era. You don't know what any of it means. But you do know that you've never been more alive. You don't expect fanfare when you return to the archive. And you don't get any. But you do get a new drawer. Deeper, smoother, lined with padded silk and a sachet of dried pomelo peel to ward off silverfish. You're now categorized under cross-district irregulars, high-fidelity originals, which is about as close to a medal as a tax receipt can hope for. Your new neighbors include a misfiled census log that predicted a marriage before it happened and a dispatch note once mistaken for a poem because of its unusually poetic handwriting. You fit right in. But fame, even in the form of scholarly footnotes and careful annotations, brings risk. 2 weeks after your return, someone attempts to requisition you, without authorization. It starts as a casual request from a junior researcher, just for review, they say, quick comparison, minimal handling. Then comes a second request. Then a third, more assertive. The archive director politely but firmly declines each one. The room grows tenser. And then, one humid afternoon, the glass over your storage case is found slightly ajar. Not broken. Not shattered. Just nudged. There are no signs of tampering. Nothing is missing. But the head archivist is furious. She orders a full review of security procedures and temporarily places you under what they call quiet custody. This involves a sealed scroll tube, an internal-only access ledger, and a guard who keeps his tea on the same table where you now rest. It's oddly cozy. You're not frightened. Paper doesn't get frightened. But you're aware of the weight of attention now pressing on your brushstrokes. Each line once meant only to record grain now carries intrigue, suspicion, value. Fun fact, certain Ming-era receipts were smuggled out of archives to settle village disputes or inheritances generations later. Some were believed to hold land rights, hidden in plain text, argued over like treasure maps. Historians still argue whether these claims were ever legally valid or just wishful interpretations by desperate descendants. Your brushwork, already admired, now begins to attract style chasers. These are copyists and scholars who attempt to mimic the handwriting of anonymous clerks from history. One such enthusiast, a student from the capital, spends 4 days creating his own Chen rice replica in your exact form. It's decent. A little too eager in the loops, but heartfelt. The archive agrees to let him display his copy in the next exhibit of Ming documentation artistry. Your replica stands under warm lighting, behind pristine glass, with a caption that reads, "Inspired by receipt Z42, origin unknown." No mention of your anomalies. No hint at your quiet little secrets, the crooked ink ripple, the pink seal debate. Just the clean, presentable version. And you? You remain sealed. Untouched. The true version, resting behind a triple lock case labeled "No Public Access Without Chancellor Approval." You think this might be the peak. But of course, the bureaucracy is never done. The Central Archive in the capital hears of you. Rumors travel via scrolls, scholars, and one overly talkative calligraphy blogger who may or may not exist. A request arrives, digitization. Preservation through replication, analysis, and eternal grayscale. You are removed, carefully, and transported to a special annex. It's sterile, bright, cold. They call it the imaging chamber. A technician with padded gloves places you under a large iron device that clicks and hums. Bright light sweeps over your fibers. Your strokes appear, line by line, on a lacquered screen. Enlarged, sharpened, digitized. You flinch slightly under the intensity, but you endure. The result? An ultra-high-resolution facsimile, stored in 4 separate repositories and logged with 17 tags, one of which reads possible narrative markers, non-ledger. They're still chasing the meaning of Chu and E. You're now part of a digital archive. Anyone with clearance can summon your likeness with a flick of a fan-shaped mouse. But you? The real you? You remain boxed in silk, dark and dry, behind thick cabinet doors that click shut with the authority of centuries. Outside, summer rain whispers against tiled roofs. Inside, you rest. Not forgotten. Just, increasingly legendary. The thing about digital fame is that it multiplies. Within weeks of your facsimile going live, you're downloaded, examined, annotated, and, of course, mildly misinterpreted by scholars from 6 provinces and at least one rogue tax enthusiast in Fujian. You find yourself cited in dissertations titled Trans-Bureaucratic Identities in Late Ming Provincial Receipts and Ink as Ideology, the Semiotics of Seal Hue. One especially ambitious researcher proposes a musical composition based on the rhythm of your brushstrokes. It's a lot. And still, you lie there, folded, real, quiet, until the day a delegation arrives. Not from a local school or mid-level archive, but from the Imperial Records Conservancy itself, the highest body of preservationists in the land. They speak in low tones, carry credentials with red wax seals, and wear robes whose embroidery reflects candlelight like still water. Their purpose? Re-evaluation. Apparently, someone up high believes your double signatures may hold political significance, suggesting dual oversight or a hidden tax trial not previously documented. Suddenly, your pink seal, once a harmless quirk, becomes the subject of institutional reanalysis. There are whispers of forgery. Or worse, dual authority conflict. Historians still argue whether any such events occurred in the year you were dated, or if these are just speculative narratives invented by researchers trying to secure funding. But for you, the consequences are very real. You are pulled from your drawer again. Your soft pouch is replaced with a rigid lacquered box. You are transported under escort, 2 officials, a record keeper, and 1 man who sneezes too much, to a stone-walled review chamber lined with humidity gauges and scroll stands. The first order of business? Spectral ink analysis. They pass you beneath a lens that refracts light into silent rainbows. Every fiber of you glows in waves, charcoal black, rice yellow, iron gray. They scan your reverse. They read the chew and the E with the reverence normally reserved for dynastic poems or stolen wills. Then, the debate begins. 3 experts in loop-form calligraphy examine the strokes for authorial interruption. One believes the E was added by a courier as part of a routing system. Another insists it's a misplaced registry mark. The third declares that it might be a name, yes, but not a person, perhaps an office designation. Perhaps even a joke. A joke? On you? The fourth expert arrives late, examines you in silence, and says only, keep it. The ambiguity is elegant. It's added to your record. Verbatim. Fun fact, some of the most cited historical documents owe their longevity to errors, anomalies, and mystery scribbles, not their content. Receipt Z42, it seems, has joined their ranks. Your original casing is deemed insufficient for current value status, so you are now housed in a scroll tube lined with brushed cotton and bound with a string dyed with inkstone pigment. The box bears a new tag, archival object, category elevation pending final review. They move you again. This time, deeper. You're now shelved in a chamber known simply as the undervault. There are no windows here. The air is filtered. The walls are lined with clay bricks. The shelves are ironwood. Other items stored here include a birth scroll rumored to have been signed by a prince, a wheat bond with a phoenix watermark, and a small folded fan inscribed with poetry that historians still debate was either heartfelt or performatively dreadful. You're no longer accessible by student scholars. Not even senior archivists may view you without 3 signatures and a full humidity report. You're, quite literally, a locked box of uncertainty. And yet, you're still just a receipt. Still recording the same rice payment, still sealed with that odd pink-red hue, still bearing your 2 shadowy names. Nothing in your ink has changed. But everything around you has. People now write about what you might mean more than what you actually say. The great irony of archival fame, the more people admire you, the less anyone touches you. Still, you don't mind. You've outlived the farmers who paid the tax, the clerks who wrote your name, the officers who stamped your seal. Now you outlive even interpretations. That's bureaucracy. That's legacy. The undervault is not what you call lively. It's quiet, not sleepy quiet like the county yamen at dusk, but dead quiet. Stifled. Reverent. The kind of quiet that makes dust hesitate before settling. You rest inside your upgraded housing, nestled among relics no one dares breathe on. The air is cold, and so dry that even time seems brittle here. Your custodians change. Not scribes or scholars now, but preservationists, people who specialize in temperature curves, humidity thresholds, and fiber stress response. They speak in numbers, not poems. They refer to you by catalog ID. And while they may not admire your brushwork the way Master Shen once did, they treat you with extraordinary caution, like you might shatter if given a sideways glance. Your seal is measured. Your thread tag scanned. Your outer folder is replaced with a pH-neutral envelope stamped "Do not replicate without council vote." There's a form just for moving you from shelf to table. It requires 7 fields, 2 sign-offs, and 1 linen glove. Once a month, a routine inspection is performed. Someone unrolls your inner housing with robotic grace, holds you up under specialized light, notes the fading of your corner character, and records it in a log that only 4 people are trained to read. You now exist in 4 registers: physical, digital, thermal, and theoretical. Yes, theoretical, because a recent academic journal questions whether you were ever meant to be a receipt. The author suggests you might be a form of hidden communication, bureaucratic poetry, they call it, sent through layers of tax records to evade censorship. Historians still argue whether bureaucratic poetry is real or just wishful thinking by over-caffeinated researchers with a love of mystery. You're cited again. This time, in a paper titled Ink is Message, the semiotic power of the everyday scroll. It calls you a palimpsest of practical and poetic impulses. Another essay refutes this entirely, claiming your marks are purely functional, and that romanticizing rice taxes is intellectually irresponsible. You are, against all logic, now controversial. And then comes the request. From overseas. A research institution, far away, across an ocean, wants to study your digital twin. They don't ask for the original. They know better. But they want the scan, the metadata, the texture readouts. They want the soul of your fibers in numerical form. The Conservancy agrees. A courier is dispatched with a sealed case containing a secure chip. Inside that chip, you, rendered as millions of microscopic readings, every quiver of ink and shadow of brushlift cataloged into binary poetry. And across the ocean, a roomful of scholars opens you for the first time on a glowing screen. They zoom in. They marvel. One of them, allegedly, saves your image as desktop wallpaper. For daily inspiration. You are dissected, analyzed, and eventually featured in an exhibition titled Unseen Voices, Silent Histories of Paper. You're the only tax record in the show. Back home, your real body rests, unbothered. No light, no movement, just the stillness of elite retirement. But you're more traveled now than ever. Students download you. Professors cite you. Artists draw inspiration from your margins. One calligrapher, clearly ambitious, tattoos your signature loops down her forearm. You are no longer just a receipt. You are a reference, a case study, a metaphor. You have been interpreted into meanings you never declared, into debates you never intended to host. And yet you endure, not by clarity, but by opacity. Fun tidbit, some of the most famous pieces of ancient literature were later revealed to be shopping lists. Or jokes. Or, yes, receipts. Historians still argue whether meaning is assigned or discovered. You've become their favorite battlefield. And so, inside your sealed vault, untouched by sun or smudge, you wait. Not to be understood, but to remain intriguing. The seasons shift unnoticed in the undervault. Outside, plum blossoms bloom and fall, summer rains soften stone paths, and snow dusts tile roofs in monastic silence. Inside, you remain wrapped and waiting, eternally mid-sentence in the world's longest bureaucratic conversation. Then, one day, the air changes. You are requisitioned. Not for research, not for replication, but for transfer. A national exhibit is being prepared. Title, The Life of Paper, Ming to Machine. And you, tiny you, tax receipt you, have been selected for temporary display. The vault personnel treat the transfer as a ceremony. White gloves. Silk-lined cases. 2 separate people just to carry you from shelf to prep table. A documentation specialist reads your metadata aloud as you're examined. Category, tax receipt, year, 42nd fiscal cycle, status, classified artifact, anomalous signature, confirmed. You are issued a transport box custom fit to your dimensions, humidity calibrated and shock resistant. You're placed between 2 sheets of glass with UV protection, bound at each corner with embroidered silk clips. Then, as evening falls, you're gently loaded into a padded cart, escorted by museum couriers and a bureaucrat who hasn't smiled since the last dynasty. The trip takes 6 hours, during which no one speaks above a whisper. A preservation technician reads you poetry, unironically, the entire ride. When you arrive at the exhibition hall, you're the first item unpacked. The display team hovers around like midwives. They debate lighting angles, background textures, the precise wording of your caption. And when the display case closes, and the lighting stabilizes, there you are. You sit center stage in a sleek, climate-controlled glass box, surrounded by artifacts of greater color but far less mystery. A Tang scroll glows warmly nearby. A Qing invoice boasts gold dust edges. But it's you the visitors linger over, brows furrowed, faces close. They read the caption. Receipt Z42, Ming Dynasty, circa 1479. Issued for grain tithe. Contains rare dual marginalia, Chu and E, and disputed seal hue. Widely studied, yet never definitively explained. Some visitors lean in and smile. Others take notes. A few shake their heads, as if baffled that something so ordinary has endured so long. A child presses his hand to the glass and whispers, "Why is it famous?" His mother replies, "Because no one really knows." Fun fact, receipts were often thrown away within days of issue, burned in batches, or eaten by rats. You, dear slip, are the exception that made it through. Not because someone preserved you, but because someone forgot to destroy you. Historians still argue whether bureaucratic negligence was the true savior of history. During your month on display, you're photographed endlessly. Shared, admired, debated. One particularly dramatic museumgoer kneels in front of your case and calls you the original quiet rebel. You develop nicknames online: the paper whisperer, Pink Seal, the document that lived. Someone composes a short musical piece based on your brushstroke rhythm. A minimalist dance is choreographed to reenact your emotional arc, though it mostly involves slow turns and a lot of folding gestures. At the end of the exhibit, you are returned with even greater reverence than before. Your case now includes a special clasp with embedded cinnabar beadwork. You are placed in a deeper drawer, below a new placard that reads, "High Significance, Non-Standard Provenance." You don't know what that means, but it feels permanent. The undervault accepts you back without fuss. No more analysis. No more lights. Just the familiar silence. And in that stillness, you reflect. You were born of rice, ink, and obligation. And yet, against every expectation, you've become a symbol. Not of certainty, but of the quiet things that last. Back in your familiar drawer, the walls feel tighter, quieter, as though time itself is leaning closer, listening in. The undervault is unchanged, of course, unchanging by design, but something in your fibers has shifted. You have been seen. And not just by a sleepy clerk or overcaffeinated scribe, but by thousands, students, artists, diplomats, scholars. You've been dissected by academics and adored by accidental poets. Your loops and seal and even your invisible scribbles have sparked entire paragraphs in journals, coffee-fueled arguments in lecture halls, and more than one awkward musical interpretation. But now you lie dormant again. Or so it seems. Because you're not done. The Conservancy, it turns out, has higher plans. A major reclassification effort is underway, a re-examination of artifacts to determine their long-term historical vitality. This is bureaucratic code for deciding who stays in silk and who gets downgraded to digital-only preservation. They're ranking documents. They call it paper relevancy harmonization. Yes, really. And you? You are a wild card. You're too old to dismiss, too irregular to categorize, too studied to ignore, and too beloved, by at least one influential curator and several thousand online fans, to quietly vanish into byte form. So begins the next round, classification interviews. No, not with you, your paper, but with about you. Experts line up to speak on your behalf. A team from Jiangsu argues you represent a transition period in Ming regional oversight. A museum in Nanjing wants to nominate you for permanent exhibitional legacy status. A scholar from the Western Academy argues your enduring mystery encourages public engagement with tax records, the underdogs of documentation, she calls them. Someone suggests creating a documentary. Someone else suggests making you a mascot. And then someone goes too far and recommends adapting your story into an illustrated children's book titled Ming and the Mystery Receipt. This receives polite silence and is never mentioned again. Meanwhile, you remain still, listening. A new tag is stitched to your case, status pending, public interest review. This is rare. It means they're considering not just academic value, but emotional resonance. You have, somehow, crossed from fact into feeling. Fun tidbit, there's precedent. A Ming Dynasty fishing license once avoided deaccession because schoolchildren wrote poems about it. Historians still argue whether cultural affection is an acceptable metric for preservation. You're becoming Exhibit A in that argument. One night, the junior archivist assigned to monitor your humidity levels sits beside your drawer, exhales deeply, and says aloud, "I wish I mattered the way you do." That thought lingers. Not because you're self-aware, but because, in some way, he's not wrong. You were never meant to endure. You were meant to confirm a payment, then fade. But here you are. A whisper in policy debates. A muse in modern calligraphy. A spark in quiet minds. And just when you begin to settle into this new layer of stillness, a letter arrives. It's sealed in gold and stamped with the emblem of the Chancellor's office. It reads, "By decree of the Archive Harmonization Council, Receipt Z42 is to be elevated to Level 1 cultural artifact with interdepartmental visibility and integrated public access narrative." Translation: you're official now. Your story is no longer just footnotes and whispers. It will be told. In classrooms. In exhibits. In books, hopefully not that children's version. And in digital archives with an asterisk next to your entry, linking to a note that simply says, "Anomalous in origin. Revered in reflection." Your drawer no longer opens with the mechanical formality of routine. Now, each time the latch clicks and the air rushes against your fibers, it's with the hushed weight of significance. People speak more softly around you. Even the interns, who once joked about finding ghost poems on the backs of old scrolls, now lower their voices as if your paper is sacred, too fragile for sound. You are summoned again, not for analysis this time, but for narrative inclusion. It's a new department. Newly funded. Newly enthusiastic. The Documentary Engagement Office is tasked with building interpretive bridges between ancient records and modern audiences. They believe stories matter more than stats. Context over cold data. And you, old slip, are their ideal protagonist. They begin recording. A young voice narrates your journey into a small black lacquered microphone. The reader stumbles over your seal code at first, category pink C. Wait, is that real? But recovers quickly and reads your date and grain tally like reciting a bedtime tale. There's warmth in her voice. A smile behind her vowels. She likes you. It's obvious. They create an audio tour featuring you. You're slotted between a Tang Dynasty silk trade report and a Qing examination failure scroll. Your story stands out, not because it's grand, but because it's small. And that, paradoxically, makes it enormous. The script calls you the document that slipped through the cracks and rewrote the ledger. A poet is invited to write about you. She sits before your case, sketchbook in hand, for nearly 3 hours before penning a single stanza. Loop by loop, you outlived law. A rice-born thread of silent awe. No one knows exactly what it means. But no one disagrees with it either. Fun fact, in early Ming courts, poets were sometimes hired to annotate public proclamations, adding decorative lines to dry mandates in the hope that readers might linger longer. Historians still argue whether this improved compliance or simply distracted from the fines. Your digital scans are cleaned up, recolorized to better represent your actual hue, and released with an accompanying commentary by 2 historians and 1 delightfully passionate graphic designer. They title the package Z42, Echoes of Authority. You're not sure what echoes have to do with you, but the promotional poster features your seal enlarged to the size of a dinner plate. It's stunning. Children start writing essays about you. Not just the what but the why. Why did a receipt matter? Why did someone write on the back? Was it love? A warning? A mistake? You don't answer. But you hold the question quietly, the way only paper can. Meanwhile, your case is upgraded again. It now features microclimate sensors and subtle internal lighting that activates only during visitor hours. A new placard is installed beside you, featuring a simple phrase. Proof of payment. Proof of presence. It's a marketing line, of course. But it resonates. People queue up to see you. Not in crowds. Not for spectacle. But in ones and twos, lingering students, silent archivists, a grandfather with a child on his shoulders. They look. They think. Some smile. Some frown. 1 or 2 even cry. Quietly. Uncertain why. And that's the strange miracle. You haven't changed. You're still the same rectangle of bamboo pulp and iron dull ink. Still the same rice tally. Still the same smeared seal and uneven margin. But in the minds of those who read you, truly read you, you've become more than a record. More than a relic. You've become a mirror for something they can't quite name. You were once dismissed. Now, you are read. Now, you are remembered. Your glass case is polished twice a week now. A rotating team of attendants monitors every detail, humidity, light exposure, vibrational interference. Yes, that's a thing, and even the microflora in the air around you. You are no longer just part of the archive. You are an archive unto yourself, a living fossil of ink and intention. And yet, despite all this attention, the oddest thing begins to happen. People stop looking at your surface. They begin looking through you. It starts with a quiet professor from the southern provinces. She leans in one afternoon, reads your summary plaque, then turns to the museum guide and asks, "But what do you think the clerk was feeling?" The question hangs. Soon, more questions follow. Why this handwriting? So neat. Why did someone press the seal a second time? What was the weather like that day? Why did no one file you away properly? And then the big one. Who was E? A new theory emerges, that E and Chu weren't names at all, but positions. Temporary titles, perhaps. Roles within a mobile taxation task force. One researcher digs through obscure Ming personnel logs and finds two faint references to tax route observers known only by single-character designations. Historians still argue whether these figures were real, or whether later archivists invented them to explain away anomalies. But your fame, as always, benefits from the mystery. A second, far more fringe theory appears, that Chu and E were lovers. Scribes, separated by regions, embedding messages to each other through receipts passed along bureaucratic arteries. This theory has very little evidence, but an enormous following online. Someone even writes a novella. Another person starts a Chu and E fan page. There's fan art. There's merch. And then, there's the podcast. Inked Hearts, the secret love letters of the Ming bureaucracy. You're the pilot episode. The host describes you with such gentle reverence it almost sounds like a lullaby. Imagine, if you will, a single slip of paper, tucked in a drawer for 5 centuries, whispering across time. You've gone viral again. This time not in academia, but everywhere. Artists remix your calligraphy into abstract visuals. A minimalist clothing brand silk screens your seal onto linen robes. A university names its archival fellowship after you, the Z42 Legacy Grant. It funds research into forgotten materials with extraordinary endurance. Fun fact, one real estate agency now uses your story as a metaphor in their ads. Like Receipt Z42, we believe the little things endure. Historians, predictably, object. But their protests only fan the flames. Back in your vault, things remain cool and still. But you sense the shift, the reverberations, the gentle hum of relevance pulsing outward. Then comes the replica request. A prestigious art foundation in Kyoto asks to commission a handmade reproduction, not a digital copy, but a physical facsimile using period-accurate tools. They want to showcase the spirit of paper in a traveling exhibition, and they believe your likeness is the key. A master artisan is selected. She studies your curves, your frayed edge, the way your ink bleeds slightly on the grain. Her fingers trace your ghost through a magnifying lens for days. Then, in silence, she begins. It takes 3 weeks. The result is uncanny. The weight, the color, even the mild warp in your left corner, everything is captured. And yet, the replica is not you. When placed beside the original, people still lean toward your glass. Your realness. Your quiet weight. The sense that you have seen. That's the thing about paper. It absorbs everything. Pressure. Oil. Heat. History. Your brushstrokes may have faded slightly, but their weight has only grown. Now, a new plaque is proposed, one not just about data or provenance, but presence. It reads, Z42, a record of rice. A testament to touch. And beneath it, for the first time, the names Chu and E appear in formal print. A footnote offers no answer, only possibilities. A few grains of mystery left to sift through. Which, of course, is how you like it. The year turns. Not dramatically. Just quietly, new calendars hung, new budgets argued over, and, somewhere deep beneath all that noise, you still rest, untouched. Your glass is polished. Your fiber scan updated. But no one opens your case. Not because they'd forget, because they remember too much. You've become a sacred object. Not religious, though someone did once light incense beside your replica, but symbolic. You're the document that survived, that outlived both function and fashion. And now, people hesitate to disturb you, as if touching your paper might undo something delicate and precise. Then one afternoon, a new visitor arrives. She's not a scholar, nor a student. She's not carrying a notebook or microphone. Just a wide-brimmed hat and a little too much curiosity. She stands before your case for a long time. Doesn't read the plaque. Doesn't take a photo. Just looks. She leans close. mouths something. Then, she pulls from her bag a folded piece of modern paper, cream-colored, machine-trimmed, and she slips it into the suggestion box with a small clunk. Later that day, the curator finds it. The message is simple. Why do I feel like this paper remembers me? It's unsigned, untraceable, but it sparks a wave of responses. Soon, the museum opens a guest book beside your display. Not for comments, for confessions. Visitors write memories, questions, whispered secrets. They address them to you, as if you've become the paper priest of a silent congregation. Some are short. I used to forge my mother's signature. I'm sorry. I lied on my tax form once. I still feel guilty. My grandfather hoarded receipts. Maybe they spoke to him too. Others are long, spiraling pages of regret, hope, unanswered questions. One girl writes a poem about impermanence. A boy draws your seal over and over until his fingers smudge the page. The museum staff is baffled and delighted. They begin scanning the entries, anonymizing them, storing them in a growing archive titled the Z42 Correspondence. You've become the receiver of ghosts. Fun fact, in the late Ming, villagers would sometimes write letters to the dead on scraps of discarded tax paper, believing that government seals, once empowered, could carry messages to the spirit realm. Historians still argue whether this was ritual or rebellion. And here you are again, the silent vessel. Through all of this, you say nothing. You do nothing. And yet, your impact grows. Like water soaking slowly into clay, invisible but irreversible. A documentary is made. Quiet, slow, meditative. 30 minutes of soft narration, gentle music, and close-up pans across your strokes. It wins an award. No one expected it to. A follow-up is commissioned, the paper that refused to be irrelevant. Your caretakers rotate. The museum hires a document experience designer, an odd title for someone whose job is mostly to make sure your lighting feels reverent. She succeeds. Visitors linger. Some cry. And then, one day, the seal comes loose. Not the physical one, no, that's intact. But the meaning of the seal. A linguist, revisiting ancient pigment recipes, discovers that the specific blend in your pinkish red was only used for a brief 14-month window between two taxation reforms that almost no one remembers. Suddenly, your date is wrong. You're not from year 42. You're from year 43. Which means, you predate the county records that claimed you. You're not from Dongping or Dongqing. You're not even from that prefecture. You were misfiled. Your entire life has been one glorious bureaucratic mistake. Historians, naturally, explode with excitement. Papers are rewritten. Articles updated. Your metadata amended with both apologies and exclamation marks. The discovery is not seen as a disqualification. It's a revelation. You're rarer than they thought. Not a standard receipt with anomalies, but a transitional artifact, evidence of a reform-era scribe whose brush wandered between systems. Theories abound. That you were a rogue test slip. That you were part of a pilot program. That you were always meant to vanish, but never did. The girl with the wide-brimmed hat returns. She stands before your glass again, eyes wet. This time, she doesn't write anything. She just nods. And in that moment, you, little paper of grain and ink and accidental immortality, feel the weight of everything you've come to mean. What happens when something meant to be temporary becomes timeless? Now that your true age is known, everything else starts to shift, like light hitting a dusty room at a new angle. You haven't changed. Your fibers haven't moved. But the stories around you rearrange themselves like pages unshuffling. Scholars redate the neighboring records in your drawer. Regional maps are redrawn, just slightly, to account for your new origin. Archive staff update your entry with an asterisk, then another footnote to explain the first footnote, until your database file looks like a tree with too many branches. But none of that touches you. You remain still. You remain paper. And yet, the energy around you crackles like tea left too long in the pot. The museum begins a new program, Living Margins, a rotating series that pairs historic documents with modern commentary. Naturally, you're first. But instead of lectures or essays, the curator chooses a different approach, audio fragments recorded by visitors, played softly in a looped hush near your case. Some are poetic. I think about who wrote this when I can't sleep. Some are raw. I hid a receipt like this when I was 14. I never told anyone what it proved. One is whispered through tears. My grandfather died thinking his paperwork was lost. What if something like this turns up for him? You don't answer, of course. But you listen. Always listening. Meanwhile, your seal's pigment becomes the subject of a doctoral thesis. Its formulation, now reconstructed from microscopic samples, is dubbed Z42 vermilion. A pigment company licenses the recipe, slightly modified, and releases a limited edition ink called Survivor Red. The logo is your looped calligraphy. They donate part of the proceeds to archival preservation funds. Fun fact, ink used to carry scents, intentionally. Some Ming scribes prefer to blend with crushed orchid root for calmer handwriting. Historians still argue whether calmer handwriting led to lower error rates, or just better naps at the desk. Your story continues to spread. A well-known author pens a novella inspired by you. The tale follows a clerk in a collapsing dynasty, tasked with hiding messages in tax slips. The final page is blank. Fans are instructed to write their own endings, on paper. And then, the unthinkable. You were nominated for UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. Yes, a receipt. An ordinary thing turned extraordinary by endurance, accident, and the relentless curiosity of people who saw more in your curves than totals and dates. The nomination file calls you a singular convergence of administrative function and collective longing. Your original seal, the pigment, the marginalia, even the ink blot, all referenced, annotated, revered. Back in your chamber, the undervault adapts. You now rest beneath a newer, even softer lighting array designed to simulate lamplight from the Ming era. The walls around your case are painted a muted rice beige, like the storerooms of the past. A tiny ceramic frog sits discreetly beside your label, an homage to that jade figurine you once dried beside, all those lifetimes ago. Visitors leave offerings. Not real ones, this isn't a shrine, but folded slips of paper, calligraphy practice sheets, little loops and stamps. One child draws you, badly, with a smiley face added to your seal. You've gone beyond artifact. You're part of the public imagination now. And as such, your image circulates. Not just in museums or classrooms, but in screen-printed hoodies, in sketchbooks, in zines made in dorm rooms lit by borrowed desk lamps. You don't resent it. Paper doesn't judge. You simply hold the weight of all this. The rice that was paid. The names that may or may not have meant love. The questions left open. The fact that none of it was ever supposed to last, and yet, here you are. The final phase of your public life begins not with a ceremony, but with a click. A soft, deliberate one, the sound of a new interface going live. The Z42 Digital Companion Archive is officially launched, a richly detailed, publicly accessible, hyperlinked ecosystem of everything you've ever been, touched, hinted at, or inspired. It opens with a full scan of your front and back, both high resolution and in a stylized, brushstroke-enhanced format designed for school use. The landing page background? A gentle animation of your ink drying, loop by loop. You're given your own submenu. Ink and fiber, microscopy studies of your material makeup. Margins and mystery, all known theories about Chu and E. The audit years, a reconstructed timeline of your brush with silver discrepancy fame. Voices to paper, audio entries from visitors who spoke to you, now indexed and transcribed. Replicas and ripples, an evolving gallery of artistic responses. You are no longer just a record. You are a network. And your reach grows daily. People begin creating. Inspired by your silence, your survival, your gentle refusal to fade. One artist embroiders your seal onto fabric and calls the collection impermanence. A monk paints your brushstrokes onto stones and leaves them in public parks. A tattoo artist begins offering a Z42 signature loop design. For people get it in the same week. None of this was in your original job description. Originally, your job was to say, rice was paid. That's it. Now, you say so much more, and yet, still exactly that. In your vault, a new glass plaque is installed beneath you. It contains a quote from one of the anonymous visitor notes. This is how I want to be remembered. By accident, by softness, by outliving the need to be noticed. It's unsigned. Fitting. Meanwhile, academics continue to swirl around your mystery. A new school of thought emerges, dubbed functional romanticism, centered around the poetic survival of practical objects. You become its mascot. Some protest this. Others embrace it. The debates stretch long, meandering like brushstrokes over wet paper. Fun fact, in some imperial courts, records were preserved not because of their utility, but because they were beautifully made. One emperor reportedly saved a salt tax notice because the scribe's hand reminded me of spring winds. Historians still argue whether that's a literal or euphemistic statement. Your next exhibition will be your last public one. Not for lack of interest. On the contrary, it's because the museum can't justify moving you anymore. You've reached artifact stasis, a point where value and fragility intersect, where touch becomes too dangerous and light too greedy. The exhibit will be called Proof. You will be the closing piece. It's designed as a quiet coda. A final room, softly lit, paper-colored walls, and a single glass pedestal. You, resting within. No music. No projections. Just a scroll on the wall that reads, "This is the receipt that remembered." And made us remember, too. Visitors will be given a blank slip of handmade paper as they exit, encouraged to write their own line. A thought. A memory. A name. They won't know, but those slips will be archived, too. Quietly. Unobtrusively. One box at a time. You'll never read them, but you'll make them possible. That's what you do. That's what you've always done. And now, you rest. Not in obscurity, not in neglect, but in a kind of curated stillness. A final pedestal in the museum's quietest hall, climate-sealed, shadow-cooled, your fibers at peace. The case around you hums faintly, tuned to the breath of centuries, and the floor beneath you is built to cushion even the tremble of footsteps. No more lectures. No more scans. No more breathless debates over brushstrokes and margins. Just the soft presence of people arriving, sometimes in ones, sometimes in pairs, standing before you, and seeing not a relic, but a moment made real. They speak less now. Mostly, they read you. Some take their time tracing the gentle curl of your loops with their eyes. Others stare at your mysterious chew and e as if the answer lies in how the ink dried. They don't press their hands to the glass anymore. They bow their heads instead. You hear fewer facts, more feelings. This reminds me of my grandfather. It looks like the way I write when I'm trying not to cry. I don't know why this moves me. You don't need to reply. You've said enough. A child enters with her mother, carrying the blank slip handed out at the door. She asks softly, "What do I write?" Her mother whispers, "Something you want to remember." And so, she does. They fold the slip, drop it in the box, and leave. That paper will be archived, digitized, anonymized, added to the quiet wave you've created. A tide of silent thoughts rippling from one old receipt. Fun fact, in some ancient villages, paper was burned not just to honor the dead, but to send messages to the heavens. Maybe, in a way, every slip we write carries the same hope, that something, somewhere, will hold it for us. Historians no longer argue over you. They quote you. You're the standard now. A turning point. A case study. A bedtime story. Every once in a while, your drawer is opened, not for study, but for reverence. A gloved hand adjusts your edges, smooths the fibers, checks your seal. Not because it needs it, but because someone cares. Then the lights dim again. The visitors slow. The museum closes for the night. And here, in the hush of finality, you remain. You began as proof of rice paid. You became proof of memory held. And now, you are proof that even the smallest things, done carefully, lived honestly, left unshredded, can echo. Forever. The lights in the archive are low now. Soft shadows gather gently on the stone walls, and the last creak of footsteps fades into the deep hush of preservation. Your glass glows faintly from within, touched only by the whisper of filtered air, the delicate tick of time passing without demand. You've traveled far. Not in distance, but in meaning. From a dusty desk in a yamen office to the slow stillness of a museum case. From a scribbled tally to a cultural echo. And now, as night settles fully, the temperature drops a whisper lower, just enough to keep your fibers content. Somewhere above, the wind slips between eaves, and in your mind, if paper had such things, it might feel like the rustle of robes, the murmur of ink, the warmth of a hand laying you flat to dry beside a jade frog. The past doesn't fade. It settles. You're no longer part of a process. You are the point. Not because you were rare, but because you were made with care. Because someone, long ago, wrote something with honesty. And someone else, much later, chose not to throw it away. And that, dear listener, is history. Dim the lights. Let your thoughts go soft at the edges. Remember that every breath, every word, every small gesture, weaves quietly into something that may one day matter more than you imagine. Sleep well. You filed everything you need to. Sweet dreams.